Non-stop for 3 days. A relentless bombing campaign that's left hundreds dead and led to tens of thousands fleeing their homes. Some Israeli airstrikes, though, are more significant than others. From this site, Hezbollah launched their first ever strike on Tel Aviv this morning. Within hours, it was destroyed. But as Hezbollah stepped up their campaign against Israel, a stark warning about the future of this conflict and a major escalation.
We are in the process of preparing a manoeuvre, which means your military boots will enter enemy territory, enter villages that Hezbollah has prepared as large military outposts. You will enter into those areas with force. Your encounter with Hezbollah operatives will show them what it means to face a professional, highly skilled and battle-experienced force.
A mission many have feared since the start of this conflict, uttered aloud for the first time. The damage done by fire from the sky in southern Lebanon is vast, the death toll rising. The ability to cope near breaking point.
The strain and the pressure on the system are tremendous.
If this war escalates, what then? Can you cope? Can the health system here cope?
Well, I hope I never have to find out whether, what is the true capacity of our systems. I must say that, we have not anticipated this level of indiscriminate attacks that is targeting civilians.
Israel would argue that they are only targeting areas where they know there are Hezbollah missiles.
Well, I think that to think that people would hide cruise missiles in their homes is an insult to our intelligence.
Beirut's hospitals are now swelling with those injured civilians from the south. This woman was brought here yesterday, her son told us. Burns to her face and body, broken bones, and wounds that will never heal. She was told last night that the blast that did this to her killed her husband.
What we see the first time in my life, I'm working more than 20 years, more than 18 years, about 20 years, I'm in shock. I haven't seen before like this.
Are you worried about what might come ahead?
Of course, I'm a person, human being.
We don't know how many militant Hezbollah members are among the dead this week, but one was buried today. Another senior commander, Ibrahim Kubaisi, the man in charge of Hezbollah's missiles and rockets. The regime that has provided most of those munitions, Iran, today reaffirmed a commitment to Hezbollah, saying despite the growing number of senior commanders killed, they will not be defeated.
Yes, Israel are hurting Hezbollah. Some of the effective and valuable elements of Hezbollah were martyred. It was a loss, but this was not a loss that destroyed Hezbollah.
Israel say their mission, all they want is to be able to let their residents go back to their homes in northern Israel. And for that to happen, Hezbollah need to stop firing their missiles south into Israel. How much responsibility does Hezbollah have in this?
So Hezbollah has said, I think, and we have all heard this very clearly, that once there is a ceasefire in Gaza, Hezbollah will, all actions that Hezbollah is doing will stop.
But without the cessation of violence in Gaza, Hezbollah missiles will continue firing.
Look, I think that whatever is happening in Lebanon, it pales next to what happened in Gaza.
As of tonight, no one on either side is showing any sign of relenting, and the numbers of those dying and injured and displaced continues to rise.
And Paul joins us now live from Beirut in Lebanon. Paul.
Chris, that blunt, stark message from Israel, finally saying the words ground invasion out loud, has sent a shockwave of fear throughout this nation. Right now, there are hundreds of vehicles in queues at the Syrian border trying to flee. Many of them are Syrians who fled Syria to Lebanon looking for safety over the last decade. Now the traffic is the other way round. And it's not just Syrians in that queue. There are plenty of Lebanese in it too. We've had reports from the UNHCR of people arriving on foot. Vast crowds, including women and babies. The scale of the humanitarian challenge here is vast. 90,000 people have been displaced from their homes in the last 5 days, according to the UN. That's on top of the 110,000 displaced since October last year. Now talk to the government like we did earlier on, and they say, we've made preparations, we're doing everything we can. But talk to aid agencies and they say, this is a system that is already buckling under the weight of demand, and that's before any escalation any further.
Paul McNamara. Well, Israel's army chief says the military has been preparing the ground for a possible invasion with its latest airstrikes. It's expanded the zones it has been striking in Lebanon, with fresh attacks reported in towns around Beirut and the south of the country. But Israel was also hit by Hezbollah in the early hours of this morning. One ballistic missile targeting Tel Aviv was intercepted, while the Iran-backed group fired salvos of rockets into northern Israel. All of this as Israel continues its campaign against Gaza, with civilian deaths reported near Rafah and Beit Lahia. Syria also intercepted suspected Israeli missiles targeting its port city of Tartus, and less than 12 hours later, Israeli fighter jets stopped a Syrian drone entering its territory. And in the last few minutes, there has been a reported drone attack on the port area of Eilat in southern Israel. Well, I've been spending the day gauging the mood among Israelis here in and around Haifa, around 25 kilometers from the Lebanese border. After almost a year of Israeli airstrikes on Gaza and Lebanon, there was a Hezbollah attempt to hit Tel Aviv this morning. The medium-range missile, supplied by Iran and the biggest weapon Hezbollah has used so far, was intercepted before it could reach its target, Mossad HQ, assumed to be behind the pager and radio attack last week, which injured thousands and killed dozens, including children. In the northern city of Safed, near the Lebanese border, Hezbollah was more successful. Although again, most rockets were shot down. One did hit a house with a family inside. Neighbours scrambling to save them, calling emergency services who got there in time to prevent injuries. But these attacks are galvanizing Israeli public opinion, as we found in Kiryat Bialik. On Sunday, a Hezbollah rocket destroyed 3 houses here. The rocket landed just after 6:30 in the morning, right here, where those red repairs have been made to the road. The blast threw a car over this wall and set fire to this building, and it blew a hole in this one. A few yards away, Moore was taking cover. One rocket. He's a student who's done military service and is now ready to be called up if a ground war in Lebanon is next.
The only thing that we can do is like fight back. We can't just agree with Lebanon. They don't want us to be here. Yeah. So we can't just sign an agreement and it will be fine.
Israel soldiers on the northern border have been told their boots on Lebanese ground are the next move. So in Israeli minds, it's a question of when, not if. And first, Prime Minister Netanyahu is heading to the UN in New York.
I can confirm that the Prime Minister is still planning to go to New York. The purpose of his visit is to use the platform at the UN General Assembly to raise the plight of the hostages, 101 of them.
Gaza remains the key for all sides here. Israeli strikes kill children every day. These, the bodies of twin brothers killed in central Gaza. And ceasefire here remains the only thing Hezbollah says will bring ceasefire from Lebanon. So in cities like Haifa tonight, braced for another night watching Hezbollah rockets being shot out of the sky, the question is, when Israel's Prime Minister gets to New York, will Joe Biden be able to bring him back from the brink of all-out war? Well, Israel says the last few days of attacks in Lebanon have been to eliminate the threat from Hezbollah rockets and allow citizens displaced from northern Israel to return home. Since October the 7th, there have been cross-border attacks in both directions, and while these have often been described as tit for tat, the numbers are far from equal, as our data correspondent Kieran Jenkins explains.
Well, analysis by our fact-check team reveals that since October the 7th, for every Hezbollah attack that reached Israel, Israel has hit Hezbollah 5 times, with nearly 30 Lebanese deaths for every one in Israel. So let's take a closer look. Hezbollah has struck Israel over 1,600 times, while Israeli attacks have hit Lebanon over 8,000 times. That's 5 Israeli attacks for every 1 Hezbollah attack. Now, each attack represents the striking of rockets, missiles, or explosives in a single location, excluding those that were intercepted. And our analysis is based on figures from the independent US non-profit ACLED, Armed Conflict Location and Event Data. Now, these figures also show the death toll from these attacks on each side up to last Friday, September 20th, so not including this week's major escalation. And since October the 7th, those figures show attacks by Hezbollah had killed 28 people in Israel, while Israeli attacks on Lebanon had killed 798 people. That's nearly 30 Lebanese deaths for every Israeli death. Now, these are all civilian and combatant deaths combined. Now, you might think the difference is because Israel shoots down incoming projectiles with its famous Iron Dome, but the ACLED data suggests that's not the reason, and that Israel is launching far more attacks overall. Israel claims that Hezbollah places its own weapons among civilian populations, so when the IDF targets these sites, more people are caught up in the violence.
Well, an Israeli military spokesperson said the number of Lebanese casualties is a false attempt to create a numbers game. They told us that IDF strikes are in line with international law and it takes all feasible precautions to mitigate harm to civilians. Well, Ehud Olmert was Israel's prime minister during the country's last war with Hezbollah, which ended in stalemate. In 2006, Israel had hoped it could scupper strikes by Hezbollah using air power alone, but ground troops and tanks were eventually deployed over the border. Around 1,000 Lebanese citizens were killed during that 34-day war, twice the number killed on Monday alone. Mr. Olmert, who led Israel into that conflict, has said he thinks another all-out war with Hezbollah would be a mistake, and he joins me now live. Good evening. Thank you for joining us. Why do you think a new ground war against Hezbollah would be wrong?
I'm against the ground war in Lebanon right now because I think we have to try and resolve this unnecessary conflict. Fact is that Hezbollah never made any other presentation but that they are fighting in the north in order to impact the conflict in the south. They didn't have any reason to start this conflict, and I think that it's time to end it now. They have to pull out from the border in violation of Resolution 1701 in order to allow Israel to bring back the almost 100,000 of its citizens that were evacuated from where they live because of the almost endless attacks by the Hezbollah against their homes and their places, the schools and the public facilities. So this can be done in negotiations, and I think that there is a good basis in order to conclude it, rather than continuing this unnecessary confrontation.
I mean, Hezbollah say that the negotiation has to be about Gaza and ceasefire there. I mean, is that possible? What is the route?
It's ridiculous, you know, when I see all the statistics that you presented before. Hezbollah is fighting against Israelis living in the north part of Israel and in the center part of Israel. And this morning they were launching a rocket towards Tel Aviv because of the continued conflict in Gaza. The Gaza war has to be stopped today. I'm entirely for it, and I said it not now, but 8 months ago. But that is not in any way a basis to justify the continued attacks of Hezbollah against Israel. And when we are attacked, we have to respond, and that's what we are doing. But again, I think that there is no good reason to now embark on a ground operation that will continue forever. We were in Lebanon for 18 years. a very courageous decision of the Israeli government in 2000 caused the evacuation. And unfortunately, the Hezbollah started again in 2006 a military confrontation, which resulted in a very, I think, very painful result to Hezbollah. For 17 years, they didn't shoot one time against Israel. On the 8th of October, they started a war. They have to stop it, and we have to cooperate with the American efforts in order to allow the resolution of this without any further confrontations.
Do you believe anybody has any influence over Prime Minister Netanyahu at the moment? I mean, just ahead of a US election with a lame duck president, does America have any leverage right now?
You know my opinion about Netanyahu. I'm not a supporter of Netanyahu. As far as I'm concerned, he should stop being prime minister today. Should have been removed a long time ago. But I think the question that you should have asked is there anyone who has influence over Hassan Nasrallah, who is waging this war? And you quoted them saying that they fight against us not because we have any conflict, a genuine conflict between us and them that justifies it, only because they wanted to somehow influence the confrontation in Gaza. The confrontation in Gaza has to stop, but that doesn't justify any attacks by hundreds of rockets coming from Lebanon into the cities in the north part and in the center part of the state of Israel. And I hope that
the people.
I must say, I doubt that someone can influence Netanyahu, perhaps except for the President of America. And I hope that this trip now to the United Nations, which, as far as I'm concerned, is another theatrical event for Netanyahu to make an unnecessary speech. But if the event will lead to some kind of a dialogue with the American president to end the war in Gaza and in the north, then perhaps it will be useful.
Just briefly, I mean, the people who have influence over Hezbollah are Iran. What would your message to Iran be now, if you were still in power?
I think that Iran must understand that continuing the war with Israel will not end with just confrontation with Israel. I think that the Americans have made it clear that if Iran will continue the confrontation, they will probably meet America and Great Britain and France and others that will respond. So I don't think that we need an expansion of this confrontation. Iran should understand that this will not lead to any result that may be useful to their interest. We have to stop the war in Lebanon. We have to stop the war in Gaza. The Iranians are inciting this confrontation. They have to be forced to stop it, and we have to come to terms through the good services of America, perhaps France, in Lebanon, in order to end the conflict there.